You're listening to The Three Pillars of Success, a podcast that inspires people of all walks of life to gain perspective on what it means to succeed. My name is Geraldine Convento, and I'm best known for entrepreneurship, my skills in web presence, and SEO. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, how you doing? This is your host, Geraldine Convento, and we are here for the Three Pillars of Success podcast. I'm really excited to have today's guest, John Aden. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Geraldine.
Awesome. So go ahead and tell the audience who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
My name's John Aden. I am from Denver and work at an organization called Open Media Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to putting the power of media and technology into the hands of the people. I am also a filmmaker.
Awesome. So what do you do for fun when you're not working?
When I'm not working, well, I spend a lot of my time making films. That's, I guess, what you would call my avocation. I don't currently I'm not making money doing that, but it consumes a lot of my time, and it's the thing that I believe I was put on this earth to do.
Cool. Awesome. So as you know, the reason why we're here today is because we would like to know what your definition of success is. So would you like to explain more about that?
Sure. I'm glad that you phrase it that way. I do think the most important thing is that success should be self-defined. It should be defined by you and not by other people or what society thinks success is. Especially, and I'll probably talk about this more a little bit later on, but especially in the arts, I think artists, filmmakers, musicians, whatever it may be, really kind of struggle with whether or not I'm successful in the arts, especially if they are not being paid to produce art, such as myself. So it's important that it's self-defined.
Yeah, for sure.
I think success comes with a certain degree of happiness. And I just say that because recently I was watching a documentary on Netflix called Happy, and it was talking about how do we become happy and fulfilled in our lives? And one of the speakers in it was talking about extrinsic and intrinsic goals, and it really kind of resonated with me. By extrinsic, he meant things like money, image, and status. And I think this is what society tells us success looks like, right? And then intrinsic goals, what he meant by that is more like personal growth, going through change, or our relationships and service. And research apparently has shown that pursuing intrinsic goals results in more happiness and a more fulfilled life. And not surprisingly, that pursuing extrinsic goals like money, image, and status often can lead to unhappiness. So I thought that was an interesting way of looking at success through happiness.
So there's been a lot of occasions where we've seen celebrities, local politicians, even people within our close circles that have achieved success, and then there was a decline or something else happened that kind of took away all of those external validations. So creating an intrinsic definition of what success is really what this podcast is about. Because one thing that I realized in my personal journey is that you can be a success at any given point of time. The magnitude of success can be really large and expansive, or it could be very small and you can see yourself making step-by-step progress. But at least if you define it for yourself, then you will be able to at least measure that, pat yourself on the back, or jump up and down and be really happy.
Well, and I like that. I like, again, looking at those extrinsic goals of success. Yeah, in these people, they have it. They've made it, and yet everything just seems to collapse, or they don't appear to be happy, or whatever. The whole thing of social media, and which is, how many likes do you have, right? How many followers do you have? And that's what success looks like, right? The
Hmm.
number of thumbs up that you have on your Instagram page or whatever.
And one thing about that I find really interesting, because I used to be that way too. Like, oh, how come not that many people like this post? But what's interesting about that is there is a certain thing that's called observers or stalkers or people who are just kind of there to look and not really engage. And what I found over time was that I'd run into people that I hadn't seen for a long time, and they would say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so inspired by all of the posts that you put up. Like, I really resonated with this one or that one." And I'm like, "Oh, I didn't even think that you liked it because you didn't press the little heart, or you didn't
Right.
comment." Like, and that kind of hurt my feelings, but I realized, oh, actually you are watching and people are listening to what I have to say. So one thing that's really important is never to make any assumptions of what other people are feeling when in your view they are achieving success, and what people are thinking when they're observing what you're doing. And what's most important is just to express yourself and to do it for yourself and no one else.
Well, and I think that was certainly something I wanted to touch on in terms of success in the arts. I mentioned earlier that as a filmmaker, I pursue this outside of my real job, and I'm using the finger quotes there, right? So I'm pursuing that. Does that mean, but I'm not getting paid doing it? So does that mean I'm a failure at it, right? But what I found that I really want to do is to tell a story, right? And to entertain. It may be harder to measure that success, especially for outside observers. And outside observers, other people may kind of be confused. But if my success doesn't look like that, does that mean I'm a failure? I think these are things that I have struggled with, and I still, to some extent, struggle with when I find myself reverting back to that old way of thinking about what success looks like according to what other people think.
Hmm. Well, I really love the way that this conversation is going. And on that note, will you go into your three pillars, tell us what they are, and then a little bit of context about that?
So, those three pillars are service, following your passion, and love and respect. So, service. I've been working in the nonprofit sector for over 15 years now, and I have learned that that is a critical part of what I do. It's really important to me that I feel like I am making the world a better place. It makes me feel connected to others and to the community. It's just all I can do is just do my best. Everything else I don't have control over.
That's awesome. That's something that I tell myself pretty often. All I can do is my best.
Yeah.
Cool. How about following your passion?
Yeah, following your passion, I think that's something for me that's also really important. I remember hearing Follow Your Bliss. I think it was from Joseph Campbell. I can't remember, but just latching onto that in my young adult life and realizing that that's very, very important in my life to be able to follow what makes me excited. Again, as I was saying earlier, I feel like when I'm making films or editing films, I feel like I am, again, doing what I'm supposed to be doing in life. And it's just so hard to discount that. It's just so, so important. Again, the arts can be a very competitive field, but there's usually a way to express yourself and to be able to follow your passion without that necessarily being your vocation, your job, your real job. I think that's something I'm still striving for, but in the meantime, though, it's enough to be an avocation.
Cool. Now, how about the third pillar?
Yeah, so the third pillar is love and respect. Well, this is a quote from one of my favorite bands. The measure of a life is a measure of love and respect. And as human beings, obviously, we're social creatures, and most of us need that connection to others and to have and to enjoy the love and respect of friends and family and coworkers.
All right. So, in terms of everything that you've gone through and experienced in your life, were there any roadblocks that you had to overcome?
Sure. And I think, again, with the creative arts, it's a challenging field to get into. It's competitive. And even if you're not working in it, if that's not your real job, pursuing it outside of work can be very, very challenging. It's like having two jobs at once. And so time is very, very difficult. One thing I tried and I'm still doing, and I think this is just, it has worked out so, so well for me. And is going part time. So I went to 4 days a week as opposed to working 5 days a week. And I used that extra day to pursue my filmmaking. And if that's something that you can do, I highly, highly recommend it. There's also a book called Creative Habit by Twyla Tharp, which is really good about budgeting your time for creative folks, with the understanding that you also have these other obligations. That may be hopefully a helpful resource for the listeners too.
Cool. Yeah, I could totally relate to that. Lately, what I've been finding myself doing is I spread out work throughout the week. I own my own business, so I'm able to kind of spread everything out based on the way that I think that I can be able to meet deadlines. And so there isn't really, how some people have a rest day or a specific day where they just kind of chill. I don't really have that because I do like to spread things out, but I find that on certain days, my brain just won't do it. And I find myself, I'm a content creator. I'm very active on Instagram and YouTube, social media. So I find what happens is that I start to focus my time on recording video or content or editing for my Instagram or for my YouTube. And once I'm done with that, then I'm able to go back to my work. So it's kind of like when they say you have to feed your soul, you have to really be able to express yourself and expand your creativity and do creative things. It's so true. Because otherwise, if you get to a certain point where if you're not fulfilling what you're here to do and what your passions are, then you're really just shutting yourself down and you'll feel really resentful to all of the work and responsibilities that you have. So I totally agree with you. I think I'm actually going to make Sundays my content day because that always happens. All right. So for the listeners, some of them may be thinking about how they personally can achieve success. Do you have any advice for them?
I think this would be advice that I would give for people who are looking to pursue the arts, kind of focused towards that. Make your art for the sake of the art, not for making it big. I think a lot of people in the arts, they're doing it to be rich and famous, and it doesn't happen after their first song that they write or whatever. Do it for the sake of the art. Do it to tell a good story. We use art to relate to each other on an emotional level and concentrate on that. How am I going to relate to others emotionally speaking through my art? I think, again, society tells us that if we are in the arts and we're creating art and we're not getting paid for it, then what we're doing has no value. And I think that the paradigm is very, and that way of measurement is very unfortunate. Or if we're not famous, right, it has no value, and it can be hard to do. But to ignore that and again focus on creating art for the sake of creating that art. Also, be careful about taking on pro bono work. So taking on work for free. Something I learned from my father is when you do something for free, the perceived value of that service is $0. Mm. And so I would just urge caution when it comes to taking on pro bono work. And then finally, collaboration. My wife is the partner in my filmmaking endeavors, and I really feel like without her, I wouldn't be able to do it. She's the writer, but she also handles a lot of the other logistics. Anyway, it's just a really good partnership. And unless you're just really emphatic about being a solo artist, collaboration and partnership can do wonders in terms of pushing you. You have each other, so there's accountability there. Mm-hmm. And that can really help to drive a project to its completion.
Cool. Well, I really appreciate you coming to the studio to be interviewed for this podcast and looking forward to sharing all your views with our listeners.
Great. Well, I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.